Welcome! You're listening to the Church Files podcast, which features fun-filled, hard-to-believe, hilarious experiences from working in the church. From antics in the parish office to absurd voicemails and funny liturgical moments. You think working for the church is dull? Think again. Humor is out there. And now, here's our host, Craig Colson.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Files podcast. In this podcast, we explore funny stuff that happens at churches related to church ministry that just most people just wouldn't believe actually could happen at a church. And today's episode, this is episode 4, and it's Funny Liturgical Moments, Volume 2, and we're calling it West Coast edition because I was on the West Coast, almost the West Coast, Arizona for many, many years. So a lot of my stories come from there. And then also today we have from California, Mr. Ryan Clouse, composer extraordinaire. So welcome, Ryan.
Hey, thanks, Craig. Thanks for having me.
So how you doing, man?
Doing awesome. It's been a whirlwind few years, as you know, but it feels good to be back on camera. I had a podcast for 2 years. It was called Two Catholic Dudes. I think we ended end of 2021, and I kind of moved in a different direction for a couple years, but it's nice to be back on camera, for sure.
Nice. And I want to give you a shout out because you were the one who helped me get set up and recommended mics and the thing that I'm using to do the podcast. So Ryan was essential in getting this thing going. So
always happy to help a friend. And I mean, I shifted into kind of video production as well as continuing my parish job. But so I have all these random skill sets that kind of stack on top of each other. And, you know, you need a little bit of advice and I can get you so far. I'm jack of all trades, master of none, I always say, you know.
There you go. I kind of feel the same way. So yeah.
Like everything behind me looks good enough, but if this podcast goes long enough, these planks are going to start falling down because they're just basically stuck on the wall. It's all a facade, awesome. You know.
So you've worked for the church for a number of years, I know, and we've seen each other at different conferences and things like that over the years and gotten to know each other a little bit. So you've had funny stuff happen. So what's something funny that's happened to you?
So I was racking my brain last night because, like you said, it's been, 20 years. I grew up Catholic, but I joined the youth choir as a teenager. And I mean, this is funny enough that I learned music as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old playing heavy metal guitar. I'm talking Metallica, Pantera, Slayer, mid-1990s, and that's all I wanted to do. And so I showed up as a teenager to our teen choir, and we're doing we are companions on the journey. And then for the rehearsal, and as soon as that song stops, I'm riffing a Metallica song. And they're like, hey, bro, can you take it outside? Let's not, right? So that was how I started coming into my musical journey of the church.
Sort of a musical journey, really. You know? That's good.
I was going to worry about
No, it's a musical journey.
But I think I'd like to think the funniest first memory of music at church was me sitting in the pews as a little kid, 9, 8, 10 years old, and the adult choir at the time, who I love all of them dearly. They were kind of my mentors to me as I grew up and came into my own. But they were all amateur volunteer musicians, and there were plenty of times where the one or two guitarists had a capo on. I mean, you probably know this story many times. They had a capo on for one song. They didn't take it off.
Capo.
Yeah. They start the next song, and you have this cacophony of key signatures. But no one, again, everyone's volunteer musicians. No one has any idea what's going on. They're 2, 3, 4, 6 different keys happen at the same time.
And they just keep playing.
They keep playing, but they're all looking at each other something doesn't sound quite right. And they try to muscle through it, and no one has the wherewithal to take the capo off and fix it. And multiple times they just stopped the song and they went, hey, we're sorry, everyone. Let's try that again. I'm
gosh.
that was rough.
We had a similar thing like that happen once where I was in this church that had a choir loft, like back in the day, like up in the back, and there was organ speakers up there, but the actual organ, like the console where you play, was way down in the front of the church, and it was near the piano. Yep. But you couldn't hear, like down here, you couldn't hear the organ. The organ was, way back there. So I had two like pieces of music for this organist who came, and one was in one key, and one I had like in another key for the parts, because it had like the vocal parts on it. And I'm like, oh, let's just transpose it. No big deal. So this guy started playing, one of them, and I was playing the other one. We're singing and playing the whole song. It was like the gathering song for Mass. So I guess later I found out as the priest walked down the aisle, the organist was playing the left key, and I was playing the right key. So it was like the key of C. He was in the key of C, and I was in the key of D. And I couldn't hear it. We had no idea. I couldn't hear the organist. So the priest was like, that was the weirdest thing I ever heard in my life. Because in the back of the church, it was in this key. And as he got closer, where the speakers for the, regular sound system, where it was in a different key, I can't imagine. And we didn't hear it until the very last note. You know how like the organ holds out sometimes? Yeah. And then we were like, and then when we stopped singing, it was like, whoa! And he went like, ah! Yeah, it was crazy.
Dude, so, that's like, you could pay thousands of dollars to get a degree in composition, modern 20th century composition, and to write in multiple key centers like that. Or you could just botch it during Mass and play in two different keys. But I mean, that's a difficult thing as an organist, or, I mean, let's probably for more applicable to what we do is, when we're playing and the psalmist goes up to the ambo, it's usually in a place pretty far away from the choir area, and dealing with that delay, depending on the monitor or not monitor situation that you have as a musician. I remember one of the first times I came into this issue, it was my first time at a new parish, and the monitor situation was non-existent, but we were kind of tucked back where the main speakers had a major delay to get to me. And so the psalmist goes up there, and I'm getting her voice at like a 2-second delay. And inexperienced me didn't know to just keep playing. I'm trying to like play to what I hear, which slowed me down, and then she slowed down to me, and before you know it, we were literally at a crawl, and we didn't know how to get out of it.
Right.
Oh, man.
Well, this is good because now the people that, aren't musicians, that maybe have no idea what we're talking about in different keys or delay or something like that, they're sitting, oh, is that why the music sometimes sounds so weird in church? Because there's something bizarre like that going on.
That's the reality of it. That's the reality of it is, a lot of my stuff is music centric. I mean, I everything about my entire life has just been like music. And so that's the way I think. And that's naturally what I gravitated towards when you said find some funny stories. But the reality is no matter how many funny things we happen and what we're going to talk about on this podcast is like the majority of the congregation doesn't know, or, they'll be like, well, that was weird for a second, but then they'll forget about it because it's not like the primary focus of what we're doing at Mass, right? And that's what I tell my cantors, my choir, everything, even if they completely screw up a solo, they sing the wrong words, whatever happens, like if they turn to me and they're like, I'm so sorry, and they start freaking out, I go, stop, let it go. Yeah. Focus on the Mass, because that's what's important, right?
Yeah. Right. It was, it reminded me too when you said, my wife's going to kill me that I'm sharing this story, but
I love
it. When you said the cantor, so the cantor, if you don't know, if you're not Catholic or you don't know music, is the person, who like will lead the song. We call them the cantor. So they go up to the podium, or what we call the ambo, and they sing sometimes the word of God, right? So Kristen used to do that all the time. And what happened was she had dyed her hair. She's a brunette, but she had dyed her hair red. And so, anyway, so she had red hair for a while, and then, and she does now again, actually, years later. But, so I was at like a supermarket, shopping one night, and Kristen was over on one side of the store, and I was over on another side getting coffee creamer probably or something. And this woman comes up to me in the store, and she goes, oh my gosh, you're the music guy. I love the music at the church. She's like, oh, and when your daughter goes up there to sing, she has the most beautiful voice. And I'm like, that's my wife. And I'm like, and we're 4 years apart, whatever. She looked at me like, oh my God, well, it's a compliment to her or whatever.
I was like, is that a compliment to her, or is that a slight on you?
Yeah. I don't know, probably both ways. So yeah, but I was like, oh my. So I told my daughter that, and she's like, oh my gosh. And then one time I did a workshop and I was talking about singing the psalm, and I told the story, and I had like a picture of Kristen. I was like, wife, daughter.
Nice.
You know, like this is who they are.
That's funny. You mentioned running into parishioners at your church. I was just gonna say, like, it's better that you were buying coffee creamer than, you're in the checkout line with a 30-pack of beer, and they're like, "Hey, you're the great musician at church,
The
and you're
choir guy." Yeah.
Because I mean, not that that's ever happened to me for sure, but
yeah, if it was wine, you'd be like, "Yeah, I'm buying it for the church."
yeah, they're like, "Oh yeah, you definitely need that full-bodied cab for sure."
Everything in moderation.
Everything in moderation. Okay, so I didn't know that we're trying to reach a broad audience. Future stories, I will try to explain and not be so niche Catholic, but
Oh no, that's okay. That's okay.
using
You never know who's
all the
watching.
verbiage and terminology. It's funny. I did early on in my podcast, the Two Catholic Dudes podcast. We ran for 2 years, and it was every single week. So we ran through the gamut of topics, but I think episode 3 and 4 were a 2-part episode about funny things that happen in church. And I again came from a musical background, but my podcast partner was a youth minister, and so he just brought other stories, stuff like when he was an altar server, his brother was an altar server next to him, and he threw up right on the steps. He just started to get, he's like, "I don't feel so good," and then just like, blam, right there, like right before they were going to ring the bell. So, a lot of crazy stuff happens. My mind always just grabs onto all the musical stuff, though.
Yeah. No, and that's good. We had one time, there's a lot of funny stuff like that happens like in the parish office and stuff too. So I was thinking about doing an episode for that. And on the last 2 episodes ago, we talked about some stuff. But one of the other things, and this is probably the craziest story that, like, when you say like you can't make this stuff up, and that's why, like, when I've shared these stories for years, where people are like, I can't, like, no one could make this up. So I was teaching over at the school one day, and I go into the parish office like to grab my lunch or whatever. So I walk across the parking lot, and the receptionist that's there, she goes, "Oh, Craig, have you seen the picture? Have you seen the picture?" And I was like, "What picture?" She goes, "Oh, come here." And she shows me this picture of this like bed. Okay, and there's a lamp, like you have on your nightstand next to the bed. And she goes, "Look at the tissue box. Look at the tissue box." And I'm like, "What, the tissue box?" Like, so the lamp, I noticed the lamp on the side of the bed was on. And then there's a tissue box there. And when you take, and I grabbed a prop because I knew I would share this, but when you take like a tissue out of the tissue box, it leaves another tissue there, right? Like sticking up. Well, so apparently this guy had taken a tissue out of the tissue box, and the tissue that was left formed into like the perfect image of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And like, this kind of looks like a ghost, but I am not kidding. I looked at this thing. It was like, it was a statue of Mary. It had detail. It was unbelievable. And I'm looking at this thing, and sorry about, my faith in this one, but I was like, that is so photoshopped. It's not even funny, because this tissue thing was like perfect.
Wow.
And so, so I was like, wow, that's amazing, all this stuff. So kind of forgot about it, have my lunch, whatever. So a couple weeks later, I'm getting ready to like do music for Mass, right? And I hadn't seen my pastor. So I went back, and he's in the back, and he goes, look, there it is. And I'm like, "What, Father?" And he goes, "It's a miracle, look." And I look over, and I see this old guy, those like Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator glasses.
Like the ones they give you when
wear?
you have eye surgery or whatever.
Yeah. Like, this guy was like in his 90s, okay? And he's standing there with these Terminator glasses on, okay? And he's holding the tissue box. And I looked like it was like the last pew was there. And you'll, as like a musician, you know what this is. He had like a road case, like that you would put like your nice amplifier or something in. Like, it was all padded and everything.
Yeah.
He had taken it out of the road case, like, and he was showing it to the priest. And my pastor was like, "Look, it's a miracle. It's a miracle." And honestly, like, the thing looks like this now. Like, it did not look like the Virgin Mary at all.
Well, because he threw it in a case and dragged it around.
Yeah. So I'm thinking like he threw it in the case, or maybe when he pulled it out, like the wind hits it, and it moved or whatever.
Right.
But the funniest thing about this was this woman now walks by, and he sees her, and we'll just call her Veronica. But he goes, Veronica, look. And she goes, "Oh, John." And she pulls the tissue out and goes, and blows her nose in the tissue.
Oh my
And then like
gosh.
crumples it up and throws it in her pocket. And this guy is standing there and he's like, he looks so upset. And my pastor's like, it's okay. It's okay. It's a miracle, a miracle. And you know what the guy said? He goes, please don't tell her. She didn't know. And I'm like, holy crap, this was like real. Like this, this like, there's no way this guy
I'm sure
made
you guys
this
have.
up.
You guys took a photo of it at least, right? When it
Yeah,
was,
they had the photo from the nightstand, but she blew her nose in the tissue of the Blessed Virgin Mary.
Wow.
And then I had to like go start singing mass.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
that's what that's our job, is like all this chaos and craziness and funny things happen before, in the middle of, and afterwards, but we still got to do our job and perform. I say perform loosely, you know what I mean. But that reminded me. I mean, this one story distinctly when I was like in mid '90s when I was a kid. I remember it was the grilled cheese Virgin Mary. It was making the news. Everyone's like, the Virgin Mary is in this grilled cheese sandwich. And everyone's like, okay. Now people do that as like an art form. You seen this stuff like that? Like where they do like pancakes and stuff like that. And they like the Beatles and they flip it and it's all the Beatles' faces. Like it's wild.
well, and they sell a toaster now that will put like Jesus or the Virgin Mary like on your toast.
Yeah.
Like it imprints it. Have you seen those?
No, but I believe it, you know. So 90s,
Yeah, we're gonna
different
look.
times.
We're gonna look on Amazon.
Nice.
This is a funny story. This guy was one time was, I kind of talked about this a couple podcasts ago that sometimes, like people go, well, what, you work for the church full time? Like, what do you do all day? And sometimes it's like we're dealing with just crazy things that happen. So one time there was this guy and, he was a little bit, a little bit crazy and God bless him. That's what I would say. God bless him. But he would kind of shout out in the middle of church, like, so mass is going on and it's like a quiet part and he's like yelling out. And I don't think he had like Tourette's or anything like that. In fact, I know he didn't. There was some things at this church like he didn't like, and he's like, the Holy Spirit has left this place. Like,
oh my gosh.
And it was just kind
He's
of
like,
some
you got a heckler.
He was kind of a heckler. So the priest actually, unfortunately, had to get a restraining order against him because I guess he would, after like mass, he would come and he would start yelling and stuff. And so they had a restraining order against him. So one Sunday, we had this guy, my bass player actually is a police officer, right? And so he sees this guy in the church and he's kind of making some noise kind of before the mass started and stuff. So this guy goes back to the priest before mass in the sacristy and he goes, Father, I got my badge, whatever. And he kind of pulls up his shirt. I got my badge and, my handcuffs and stuff. He goes, I can take care of this for you. And he's like, let's call him Joe. Joe, today we need Joe, the bass player, not Joe, the police officer. Let's just celebrate the mass and not worry about it. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, well, if you need anything. So then, we go through the mass. Well, around communion time, this guy had gotten pretty rambunctious. And so this priest goes up to the musicians and he's like, body of Christ. Well, he gets to Joe and he goes, body of Christ. And he goes, if he makes another move, take him out.
Nice.
I was like, oh my gosh, because it was really getting distracting.
Yeah.
So this guy, Joe, puts down his guitar and he goes over and I see him kind of like, and he takes him outside. Well, then I found out after church was over. He handcuffed because he went out for like, I don't know, 3 minutes. And then he came back in and kept playing, And I'm like, what did he do with this guy? I'm thinking, did he call another officer or what happened? No, he handcuffed him to a pole.
Nice.
Outside. And then after the mass was over, he came and played the last 2 songs or whatever. 10 minutes later, he went out and he took him down.
Dude, I bet that guy was just screaming outside, huh?
Yeah,
Probably.
he probably was. Yeah, and you're walking up to the church and there's a guy handcuffed to a pole. But it's like, you can't make this stuff up.
I was going back to that original choir. You were thinking about just more funny things that went on. Mm-hmm. I remember when I joined that adult choir as a young adult, and I started to get like mentored from some of those directors, and they played. They came from the folk generation, the 70s. 80s, all the Dan Schutte stuff and everything. And I started playing guitar next to them and reading off of their music. And we would get to a B minor chord, and I would look over, and she would just be like this. And then after the song, I go, let's call her Kathy. I go, Kathy, I noticed you just decided not to play the B minor chord. What's going on there? She goes, oh yeah, like I tried bar chords for a number of years, and they're just too difficult. So I just decided that whenever a bar chord comes up, I just don't play. I'm like, she's just like, I'm too old for that. I'm like, so just nothing happens during those bars or that chord. She's like, yeah, I'm fine with it. I've made my peace with it.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, all right, sounds good. So I at least made a pact to myself. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give the extra mile, and I'm gonna play the bar chords. So I do play B minor chords now. But
yeah, you're a great guitar player.
Thanks, man.
Excellent!
As a musician, you have to really work well with the priest. So this one thing that happened one time at a parish I was at, the pastor was going to be transferred. So what happens is they kind of usually open list the parish. So like if other priests want to apply for the parish, they can, and then they decide who's going to go there. So this particular parish was on what they call like the open listing, right? Okay. So I called a priest friend of mine and I said, hey, you should really because we have to work well with the priest when you're the music director. So I was like, you should come check out the parish. So he had come to like a Sunday night mass, and he was just sitting in the congregation, and I saw him maybe 20 minutes before mass, and I was like, oh, he's here. And he's in plain clothes, so nobody knew he was a priest or anything except me.
Well, it's like Undercover Boss.
This woman comes up to me. Undercover Boss. Exactly. I love that show. So I always cry at that show. I need the Blessed Mary tissue box when I watch that show.
Love it.
So this priest is sitting out there and nobody knows. And so then this woman comes up to me and she goes, Craig, Father's going to be late. The priest who was doing the mass, Father's going to be late. And, can you stall for a few minutes? I go, what time is he going to be here? Well, it's a 6 o'clock mass. He said he would be there about 6:05. I just got off the phone with him. I'm like, okay, 5 minutes. So I'm like, I wanted to start on time. So I'm like, well, good evening, everyone. And I'm like, let's go over this song. And
yeah, sure.
Oh, you know what? There's another new one, right? And so as I'm going over,
you're like, you know what? I don't think you guys have been getting the Gloria quite good enough. Let's sing through the whole Gloria twice. Come on.
Yeah, in parts, this side in harmony, Yeah, so I'm just like, let me teach you. So I'm trying to do this, and all of a sudden I see the priest just running in the back, and he's bolting in to try and get his vestments on and everything.
Yeah.
So, okay, this priest, I'm just going to say he's from Africa. So he's got a pretty strong accent. And, sometimes with different cultures, when I've worked with different cultural priests, just different cultures experience different things different ways. They maybe say things sometimes that, maybe we would say something in Africa that they'd be like, oh my gosh, that's offensive. Or, so they might do that. Just different cultures express things in different ways. So I'll preface it with that. So Father comes out and he gets to the homily part where he's, going to give his sermon. And he goes, and I'm sorry, but I just like to do impressions, so I'll kind of do it a little bit. He goes, I'm so sorry. I was late. I had the problem, had to go emergency room. And we're all like, oh God,
yeah,
are you okay, And so he goes, yes, I had the constipation. He's like, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So apparently where he's from, it's just normal to talk about
that.
Bodily functions and constipation. I don't know, So I see my priest friend who, is in the congregation, like looking at me like what? What is happening here? And then he goes into like a pretty intricate description of what the doctor did and how he got rid of the constipation.
Oh my gosh.
And like it was just normal for him to share this with everybody. And I mean, there's people like just with their chins on the floor, and he's like, thank God for the enema, and he's like going, saying all this stuff. And like, it was like if you or I had like had cancer, God forbid, or something, and we were healed. Like he was so excited, like he'd be sharing about it from the rooftops. He was like, I had the enema, and he's like sharing. And then right after that, we say the creed together. So I noticed this little like 2-year-old, 3-year-old kid had been like running back and forth. And, the parents are trying to watch him. Well, in the middle of the creed, we're like, I believe in God, the Father of the Almighty. This kid runs down the hallway and pulls the fire alarm. And it's literally so, woo, woo. It's just going off so loud in the middle of the church. But we saw this kid pull it. So we know it's not like a real emergency. Like we have to evacuate everybody. So we keep saying the creed or whatever, and then I see one of our staff members just bolt to the back, to try and figure out how to, shut it off or something. So it goes off a few minutes later. So after the mass is over, my priest friend comes up and he's like, dude, this is the craziest mass I've ever been at in my life. He goes, I'm not applying for this parish. I'm going back to my parish where things are normal.
Oh my gosh.
So he never applied for the parish because it was like, it was the craziest mass.
I thought of two things while you're saying that. The quick one was priests that have accents. And the funny, real quick story was that we had a priest with a real thick Spanish accent. And I remember distinctly on Good Shepherd Sunday, he did his homily and he must have said Good Shepherd 37 times. Just, Jesus is the Good Shepherd, is the Good Shepherd, is the Good Shepherd. And after Mass, somebody went up to him and they were like, Father, wonderful homily today, but I have to ask, who is this wood chipper that you're talking about? Who's the wood chipper? I was like, wood chipper.
Kristen and I were at dinner one night with the pastor of this church, and I was telling him this story about the associate pastor, right, the assistant pastor who was there. So when this assistant pastor came, he was from the Philippines, and he had a very strong accent, and just really nice guy. But he comes up to me, and I, when you meet the priest for the first time, you don't know him at all. And you're like, hello, Father, welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And he just looked at me, he goes, you gonna sing the Kyrie? like that's, he didn't say hello. He didn't introduce himself. He goes, you gonna sing the Kyrie? And I'm like, oh, well, okay, we don't usually sing the Kyrie at this Mass, but sure, if you want me, I can sing the Kyrie. And he goes, sing the Kyrie. I was like, okay, you got it. So he comes out, he does the Mass. We sing the Kyrie because, he's very insistent.
Sure.
He really likes the Kyrie. So then he gets to his homily, and I guess he had been at this church before, and we'll just call him Father Joe, and he goes, oh, you like Father Joe? You miss Father Joe. You miss Father Joe. And he's like going on like, and he goes, you ready for story? You ready for story? And this he can say,
teach your accents.
And he's told this. Yeah, I know. I know it's horrible. So he go, and this, don't let me forget about how this got me in trouble. Because remember, I'm telling this to the pastor now about this other priest. So you ready for a story? And he goes, yeah, this guy, he goes to the Holy Land with his wife. And the first day he dies, he just dropped dead in the Holy Land. And they tell his wife, you can bury him here, cost you $1,000. If you want to drop him, if you want to bring him back to the States, cost you $3,000. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? We're just like looking at him like, and they go, she goes, oh, let's bring him back to the United States. He goes, why do you want to bring him back to the States? It costs you $3,000. You bury him here, it costs you $1,000. And she goes, because I hear last time you buried someone here, he rose again. And then he goes, you like Father Joe's story? So he would start his homily every week with this funny. So we actually kind of looked forward because he had some really good. So I'm telling my pastor this, and he goes, oh, that's a pretty good impression you do there. I'd love to hear your impression of me. And I'm like, no. And he was a good guy. We had a really good, and my wife is like under the table like, oh my gosh, So I did the impression.
Did you do it?
And he was good. He was all
nice.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah. So, I didn't get in trouble. It was, priests are people,
Right, exactly. And especially if you have a good rapport, good relationship with them, I try to always go before Mass to chat with the priest and make sure we have everything in line musically and we know what's going on. Is there anything special going on? But two, just to, have a moment with them. And especially if I don't know them too. But yes, I've had plenty of occasions where they're like, I'm like, hi, how are you today? And they're like, Kyrie? No Kyrie? I'm like, okay, cool, bye. Good talk. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and what I forgot to mention was this priest who asked me about the Kyrie. The next week, he had Mass again the same time. And I go, oh, Father, did you want me to sing the Kyrie tonight? And he goes, listen, he goes, every time I have Mass, you sing the Kyrie. Don't ever ask me again.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean,
Oh
like,
my gosh.
okay, that's the reality of us as musicians. It's like, you got to do the powwow about the Kyrie with all the priests that come in. But I mean, if he's pretty adamant about that, we would have a guest priest at my first parish, and he was pretty regular figure, like mostly every weekend. But I would go back and say, hey, good morning, Father. Just we'll do the same thing we always do. He goes, yep, we'll tell everyone that Ryan's a big fat sinner, and then you go hit it. I'm like, I mean, he was joking, of course, but.
Wow. Yeah. We had my pastor one time had told me that there was a priest that was going to come cover the Mass, and I had never met him. And so he comes in, and he was kind of had a southern drawl, like this.
Nice.
And I saw, so it was Christmas season. And again, if you're not Catholic or you don't know, we have different colors like for different seasons. So like in Christmas, they wear white, sometimes a little gold. Ordinary time, green. So I'm kind of at the piano, and I can see where he's getting kind of ready with the ministers before Mass. And I notice where it's Christmas season, so the color is white. And I see he's in a green vestment. And I'm like,
oh no.
Why is he wearing a green vestment? So I told the musicians, I'll be right back. So I walk over there. I said, hi, Father. Thanks so much for coming. Nice to meet you. I go, Father, today the color is white. And he goes, oh, what am I wearing? And he looks down, and he didn't even realize. He just threw on a green vestment. He didn't even realize what the color was. So he goes, show me what these guys wear. So I open up these giant cabinets that we have. And there's like 30 white vestments all across. Anything he wants, And he goes, oh, those are all too fancy for me. I just put on a white stole. So the stole is like the part, that goes down like a sash, like over. So he just left the green vestment on, and he puts on a white stole over
What?
Because he didn't want to rechange and that kind of thing. So, and be too fancy. So we're singing like some Christmas song, Come All You Faithful or something. And he's walking down the aisle, and all I can think is, this guy looks like a giant Christmas tree, And so then we were talking about the psalm earlier, like when you go up to the ambo. Well, in this church, when you go up to the ambo to do the psalm, you kind of walk right by the priest. And he leans over to my wife, and he goes, go get him. He just goes, go get him. And then he gave his homily and stuff. And I guess wherever he was at, they don't do the creed. And they just like skip the creed. And so he goes, yeah, which is,
I don't think you could do that.
The creed every Sunday, we all know. No, you can't do that. So, but he did apparently. So, some of the older guys that were like, things were more free flowing.
Like I do things my way. You hear?
Yeah. So he leans over to me, and he goes, in front of everyone, he goes, Chief, we do the creed here. And I'm like, yes. I'm like shaking my head. Yes, Father, trying to be inconspicuous, like, whatever. And he goes, and we had screens, projection screens in the church. He goes, is it going to be up there? Because I don't know it. So I told, it was an interesting Mass. And I told my pastor the next day, I said, yeah, we had Father so-and-so last night. And I told him, the story. And he goes, he doesn't have a sacred bone in his body.
Oh my gosh.
It's really funny.
Dude, my pastor is pretty open. He'll talk to me as well during the homily or random parts of the Mass, to the congregation, but to me. And so I had to learn really quick when I got there, like, now is not the time to doze off during the homily. I might be on my third Mass, and I was up, only got 3 hours of sleep, but like, I am laser beam focused, because at any point he'll be like, isn't that right, Ryan? Yeah. I'm like,
yeah.
Or he'll like straight up ask me a question, and he'll make me
time.
turn on the microphone and actually like answer the question. So I'm like, I better be paying attention
And answer the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had the same thing happen with this one guy one time. He's kind of like an old Irish guy, and he goes, it's like that song we sang, let it be, let it be. Can we sing that again? In the middle of his homily. And I'm like, whoa. And so I'm like, run up to the piano. I'm thinking, if I went to the restroom or something, during the homily, because for us, that's like the only like little break we get every now and then. Like we're playing, straight an hour and 15 minutes. So, sometimes that's the time, but I was glad I was there, because I just jumped over to the piano and started singing that song.
He'll call me out often at the beginning of his homily. Usually the beginning of the homily is when he's more casual conversation, then he jumps into the theology part. But like you said, we're going back-to-back masses often, and the break in between the masses is our time to rehearse and get the microphone set up. So like during the homily, I usually rush off and go to the bathroom. And so I'm like at the back of the church towards the vestibule, right? Like almost walking into the bathroom, and he's like, Ryan, where did Ryan go? Did he run off to the bathroom? And everyone turns around, and I'm like, hey everyone, yep, it's me. Going to the bathroom.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with everyone, Father. Yeah.
But like you were saying too, plenty of times priests would like call me out. I'll luckily be at the piano, but they'll be like, "It's like that song you guys know. You guys know that one song," and then they'll just call up a random song, and they'll be like, "You guys know that, right? Go ahead and play it." And I'm like, "Why would you think that I just like have this cataloged in my brain and we'll play this for you right now?" This actually just happened last weekend. It's a very simple song. I know it, but Father, it was this last weekend. We've been doing like their mini season of light. So there's been a lot of themes about light the last 3 weekends. And Father was like, "Oh, this is actually a great weekend for this little light of mine. Hit it, Ryan." And I'm like, "I know that song, but I don't have it in front of me." And I was like, "I don't know what key it is, because like you need to have a congregational key, right?" And if you don't put it in the congregational key, everyone's going to be like way too high, way too low. So I'm like, I don't want to just like learn this in front of the congregation and try to figure out the key. So I was like, nah, you sang it great, Father, because we had this happen one time. This is embarrassing to say out loud on the podcast, but it was during COVID, and I hadn't been doing anything except for staying at home, going to do stuff at Mass. And I'm not like playing piano bar music and stuff and playing in social events. And so I hadn't played Happy Birthday on the piano in forever. And we finally started coming back from COVID, and it was at the beginning or the end of Mass, and Father's like, "Hey, it's so-and-so's birthday. Let's sing Happy Birthday to him. Ryan, hit it." And I'm like, okay, I know how to play Happy Birthday. It's chord, I know music jargon, but it's like 1 5 1 5 1 4 1, I got it. But I was like, oh shoot, what key is it in? And I'm like, for like a normal voice. And so I was like, it's got to be C major, right? So I play in C major, and it's the wildly high version. And
I was going to say, that's really high.
Yeah, I forgot. I was like, wait, do we start on the root or do we start on the fifth? And I was like, oh crap, we started on the fifth. And I was like, we're way high. And I was like, I can't go back now. And so I just like, I'm a very high like rock singer when I need to be. Yeah. And so I was just like, I played it way too fast. So I was like, I got to get through this. And I just like sung it like a rock tune up the octave. And everyone was like, what? And Father was like, I don't know what just happened, but I hope you have a better birthday than that. And I was like so embarrassed. And he kept calling back to it weeks and weeks and months and even years later. He's like, I hope you know how to play that song better than Happy Birthday. I'm like, bro, come on.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Happy birthday to you.
But thanks for coming on. It's been great to talk to you for the West Coast edition of Funny Liturgical Moments, episode 2. We're going to do another podcast every couple weeks, so check us out on YouTube and Spotify at the Church Files Podcast. And if you have a funny story that you'd like to share, it's the churchfilespodcast@gmail.com. Usually we have a little story at the end that someone has sent in one, but right now I've used up the ones that were good enough, I thought, to share on the air. So what I'm going to try and do, if the technology works, is when I was at the Composers Forum a few weeks ago, I got to interview some composers, and if it works, you're going to see it right now. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to this 4th edition of the Church Files Podcast. I'm so excited to be at the Composers Forum, which is something a lot of us composers do every year in St. Louis. And we all get together for a week-long retreat, and it's just been a wonderful week. We just finished a great concert tonight. And for this episode, I just figured we'd invite some composers over before they go to bed because we're all very tired. It's been a long 4 days. So my first guest, my gosh, I am so privileged to have all the way from across the pond here, Mr. Christopher Walker with us. How you doing, Chris?
Fine.
So you've worked for the church for a few years, huh?
Since I was 6.5.
Really? And we won't ask you. how old you are.
No, please don't. I know 100. No, never mind.
So in your several years, you must have seen some funny, things that have happened, at different masses, liturgies, whatever.
Well, yeah, things like Spanish brides coming into the cathedral, and just before I can play, "Here Comes the Bride," she's going, "Here I am for my wedding," and she was at the sanctuary already, so I closed the music up. There was no need to play that.
So you just skipped right over it.
No, absolutely. But her husband to be wasn't inside. She was there, and she was in red completely.
Yeah.
Her husband was not in sight. So because Spanish weddings, I should have said they walk in together. But everyone turned to the back of the cathedral, and there was the husband to be at the back. Unfortunately, the week before the wedding, he had had a car accident and broken both legs.
Oh, jeez.
So both legs were plastered, so he was at the back.
Oh my gosh.
But he made it to the front of the church. They got married. The bride to be, she says to me, "For communion, I have to have my favorite piece. We all know it. We all have to have it. Can we please have for communion Auld Lang Syne?"
Auld Lang Syne. That's her favorite song?
I said, "It's not a sacred song." "No, but everyone know it. I have to have it for my wedding."
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I know. So
you played it?
So we had the communion song, and then I played it. I did, of course I did. It's their wedding. It wasn't Sunday bloody mass, for God's sake. That was their wedding. I played. I played it molto slow. So they
Molto slow.
So there was the other wedding where. Another Italian wedding where I didn't get paid, and at the back of the cathedral, I said, "Excuse me, where's, £25, please." And the father brought, "Oh, how much? Oh, okay." He gets out of his hand a handful of £10 notes. "How much? How many? How many do you want?" "That'll do. Thank you." But wow. I suppose I shouldn't tell the story about what happened to me in Assisi. Well, here we go. You can cut this one.
Okay.
I was in Assisi with 110 American seminarians, doing an RCIA institute for the American College in Rome. And RCIA, it means Roman Catholics in Agony. You understand? We were doing the Easter Vigil. Christian Brusselmans, the person who gave us RCIA, actually, she was the person who discovered it and gave it to the world. She was there, and the presider was Jim Dunning for the Easter Vigil. And Christian Brusselman had persuaded the original cathedral that St. Francis of Assisi had actually built the apse of, had persuaded the priest to take out all the plastic statues and the flashing lights and took out all the pews so that we could have the Easter Vigil there. And we had the font outside looking down the wonderful vista through the vines. We had the font there for the blessing of the water. Don't look. I'm nearly finished.
Okay.
It's all right.
No, it's good.
So we're in Italy, and we're in the middle of the Easter Vigil, and Jim Dunning, no one will remember his name except people who knew him. That's true, isn't it? Is there with an Italian Paschal candle, which is 5.5 feet tall.
Wow.
And Jim Dunning liked to make gestures really strong. So when you're blessing the water at the Easter Vigil, there's one line in the prayer is as we throw ourselves into the waters of baptism, and the rubric is you push the candle 3 times into the water. And so Jim very, very energetically thrust this nearly 6-foot candle 3 times into the water and brought it out. And we're praying, and he brings the candle out. And what Jim didn't know was this 6-foot candle was hollow. And so when he was thrusting it into the water of the baptism, 6 feet of water filled the candle. And when he pulled the candle out, all I can say is the sound was like a cart horse relieving itself. For about 3 seconds. And while it was still going on, Dr. Christian Brusselman said, "Keep going, pray, pray." You will probably have to cut that story.
And did you sing like "Flow River Flow" or something after that, or what? I mean, what was the accompanying hymn?
I can't remember.
Healing Waters. Did you write something on the spot?
I wished I had.
Wow. Well, it sounds like the Easter vigils in England are pretty exciting.
Yeah, that was Italy.
Oh, this was Italy. That's right. I'm sorry.
And there were 110 American seminarians there.
Oh, well, they all learned how to do it.
Or
they all learned what not to do.
None of them have duplicated the process.
They're all like, "Don't do that." Okay, now we know. Wow. Well, thanks for a little bit of energy that you gave us.
Thank you from the heart of my bottom of my heart.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
So great to have you.
Goodbye, everyone.
So, Christopher Walker,
See you
everybody.
next time.
Yeah. We will see you next time on the Church Files podcast. Remember, humor is out there. Thanks, Ryan Clouse, for being our 4th guest on the Church Files podcast.
Thanks so much. My pleasure.
Have a great one.
Well, that's our show for today. Thanks for tuning in. Invite your friends to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and our Facebook page at the Church Files Podcast. And remember, if you have a funny church story, send it to thechurchfilespodcast@gmail.com. God bless, and remember, humor is out there.